Hi, and welcome to another episode of What Teachers Have to Say. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Jake. And I always say we have a special episode, but today I've been super excited about.
This one, we've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
So we have an incredible guest today. I'm so excited for it, right? So we met this gentleman at the Stanford Summit and really hit it off. He's a change maker in education. Mr. Pat Yongpradit, he's the Chief Academic Officer at Code.org. He's a lead at Teach AI, this incredible conglomeracy of thought leaders that we're going to talk a lot about in the show. But an introduction for people who may not be familiar with him and his work. So here's what I love. Pat has kind of bridged the gap that is needful in technology right now.
Right.
So Pat originally got his undergraduate degree in computer science. So he's in the trade side of things, but then decided to be a teacher. So he got a master's degree in education.
Whoa, that's
so then
a pivot.
He was teaching for years and years. I don't know how many years, but a long time. He was a high school.
I think he says 13
Yeah, he's
years.
a high school computer science teacher. Yeah. At some point, the opportunity was put before him, and he moves to Code.org. So now he's in a nonprofit sector. And so over the past 10, 11 years, he's been at Code.org with all those incredible things. If you're not familiar with Code.org, you really ought to go check it out. They have an incredible wealth of resources, for education, for expanding computer sciences, and for levelizing the field, for really bringing marginalized voices to the forefront, which we talk about.
We do.
But yeah, so Pat was on the podcast today and we had an incredible discussion about stuff.
Oh man, it was
enlivening.
Cool. So, I feel like we're focused so much on the potential pitfalls that we're up against right now in this moment in education. Like we're worried about cheating. We're worried about AI doing so many negative, damaging things to our practice. But there are possibilities here. There are ways to use this technology that are really positive. So while we do talk about, here's some of the potential pitfalls, stay to the end because this conversation pivots in that direction. And we start talking about things that Pat is doing that
he drops some secret knowledge.
Yeah, that where it's not public knowledge yet.
Yeah.
And he really goes into that conversation headlong to see what can we do to build a community around this technology of progressive educators and innovate in this practice.
Yeah, a true educator at heart. It was so apparent speaking with Pat. His heart really lies in the advancement of education and thereby the humanizing and advancement of the human race.
Yeah.
Just drop that one out there.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat.
Word.
Well, before we get into it, just a disclaimer as always that the mission of What Teachers Have to Say is to elevate the voice of the people in the classroom, the people in the schools, administrators, all of those that call us educators. And also the work that we have on What Teachers Have to Say is not in any way affiliated with the institutions for which we work, amazing as those are. But we do like to keep that separation there. So without further ado, enjoy listening to our conversation. Pat, it's so cool to have met you. We met you at the Stanford event. And might I say my middle schooler is literally over the moon. He's such a Code.org fan that I told him today, nice. I'm like, hey, I'm talking to somebody from Code.org. Yeah. And he was like, can I tell all of my teachers today?
You can.
Yes, you can. They're a big Code.org Hour of Code score.
I mean, let me pop in virtually one day and just say hi to them or whatever.
Oh, I'd love that.
Dude,
yeah.
Awesome.
He's in a STEAM class. Cool. I'm sure they would just be over the moon to do that. Well, cool. Let me queue up a question to start us out here. So one of the things that you were talking about at Stanford, by the way, your I don't know if we call those mini keynotes, the moment that you were on stage at Stanford, the panel, it was really fantastic. And you're doing some incredible work through both Code.org and Teach AI. Could you speak to a minute, just how are those interlaced with each other? And what is your work in those two areas?
Yeah. So quick background on me. I taught for 13 years, special education science, computer science, middle and high school. And then I moved to Code.org, been at Code.org for 10 and a half years. Code.org's mission is to promote computer science education. And our and we do that through a variety of means. Awareness work, government affairs and policy, curriculum, which includes the platform, the coding tools, the videos, the student-teacher resources, all free, as well as partnerships and teacher training. So that's code.org. And I've been in different aspects of that work over the last 10 and a half years. About 15 months ago, now, mind you, we've been doing AI work for many years before ChatGPT got released.
Right.
But most of it was under the umbrella of computer science, including ethical and social impacts, but not as much about like the ed tech uses.
Got it.
So
okay.
15 months ago, we decided to that we needed to do something that's much more general, that goes beyond computer science education. We partnered with ETS, ISTE, Khan Academy, and the World Economic Forum to do this, and we called it Teach AI. And Teach AI guides education leaders and policymakers in areas such as policy, capacity building, community building, and awareness. And there are a variety of projects, including an AI Guidance for Schools toolkit that already released, a set of policy considerations and resources that will release at ASU+GSV,
Awesome.
and a number of other things related to AI literacy, the future of computer science education, and other things.
That's awesome. I'm really curious about the policy. There were some really good guidelines in that toolkit. By the way, for any of our listeners that are dabbling and getting ready to move into this, there is a downloadable toolkit at AI or at Teach AI that is truly incredible. And you were one of the authors of that. Am I right in thinking that? Yeah.
Yeah, along with a number of other organizations that are connected to Teach AI.
Yeah. Like what a valuable resource, because like our school doesn't really have a policy for AI. I think a lot of schools are in that. There's like a little caveat in the academic honesty code that says like, be honest. So my class is right now actually writing policy for the school. My English class, we just decided to take that on. And
sophomores doing this. It's pretty rad.
They're like what's coming out there. It's their assignment right now. It's incredible looking at what they're doing, but I can't wait to see the edition that you're launching in San Diego in about a month. I want to add to that. Mm-hmm. So I've got a good question for you then. You have kind of you got like all 10 fingers on pulses out there.
Yeah, you got like every aspect of this.
I can only imagine like your fractured thinking at some point, like trying to jump from one project to the other.
That's right.
But one of the things that I think code.org and then just this other action of Teach AI has done so well is working at kind of that, really focusing like, how do we begin to do this? How do we begin to expand the computer sciences across all the platforms and
right, because we were just had a great conversation with our district office, who is trying to embed more computer science tools in the North State of California, where we're located. So they have created this really cool library model for all of their tech tools because resources are slim. So they're trying to reach out and get people to check out items, check out like robotics and things to use in any class. It's because normally we associate these like tools with only like STEM, but computer science, I think since AI hit the scene, like just natural language is part of the computer science equation. So like us as English teachers, I find myself like doing a lot more computational thinking where I'm trying to teach my students how to think in a if then and like linear way in order to get better at writing, but also to get better at prompting AI to help them get better at writing. So like moving forward, I don't see it as being this sequestered thing, because I think we've always looked at it that way. Like computer science is over there and they're doing IT related stuff. We don't really know what they do. It's a black box.
The video gamer kids in the corner.
But like the more that we can bring that into every subject and make it a part of just our teaching practice, like I think that's the future of what's happening. And it seems like that is where you are kind of at as well. But doing that is the thing that's still up in the air. Like how are you moving in those directions to get more understanding of computer science stuff in more subject areas?
I mean, that is why code.org exists, to do that. To make sure that everyone has the opportunity to learn computer science, which doesn't have to happen in a computer science class.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're right. For we know that these chatbots can respond in text very well, but the thing they actually do a little bit better than that is actually write code, basic code, but they actually do it quite well. And actually, some people don't know that OpenAI released something called Codex, which was like a GPT-4 code before they released ChatGPT in November of 2022. So months before that, they already had something called Codex doing that work, and that blew the mind of computer scientists and programmers. And that has been incorporated into GitHub Copilot and other things as well. So actually, a lot of people think coding is going to be a dead art. And I think it's going to be more nuanced than that. For sure, software engineers, by and large, even now, 90% of them, I think, are using AI tools, which is good, which is great. But there will still need to be people. Actually, almost everyone needs to understand the basics just so that they can understand computing. Like literally, computing is run on code. Everything.
Right.
It's all. So like just the same way we learn biology and we're not going to become biologists, in the same way, let's still learn how to code just so that we can understand in a deeper sense how computing works. Coding teaches simple things, just that like what you type in is what the computer does. Yeah, and that's a very important thing for even young kids to understand. Like these things aren't alive. They don't think. They just do what you tell them to do, and that's it. And we learn that best by coding, actually, because there's that process of, getting it wrong and it does something wrong. No, it wasn't the computer that did it wrong. You did it wrong. So you need to fix it. And you need to think about your thinking. So there's even a level of metacognition that you learn from it. So, yes, coding will change. Things will be de-emphasized, but other things will be emphasized, and the whole world of programming will continue. And it might even flourish because of what you said, Nathan. Other kids and other subjects will be able to engage with it in a new way, a more abstract way than, they did before, a more approachable way.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me a lot of Chris Peach when we were at the Stanford Summit. Like his perspective at the end was just so awesome because I love that he just centers himself in the creative process and in like joyfulness. Like I'm a musician also. That's like my side gig to teaching. And like that creative process is so important. To like what is it that you want to do? You want to make, like, why do we make things at all? And including more and more people in that creativity. And how he was saying that, like, he was worried that his career was over. He was like, I really like teaching, but I don't see the point of, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to teach code anymore because of how good AI is at doing basic coding. But then he was saying that what he's seen in his programs is more people are coding because AI has simplified that process. It's like, there's now a bit of a scaffold into like programming knowledge that there wasn't there before. Are you seeing things like that, or is that like, or you're still in this limbo state of not knowing how it's going to impact things?
I mean, this is so early. My eyes are focused on K-12, and the higher ed people would be better able to tell you what's happening. But even they would say it's too early. It's certainly too early for K-12. I mean, most K-12 computer science teachers aren't even dabbling with like AI tools right now. It's just business as usual right now. At best, they're thinking about it, but whether they're doing anything about it, I highly doubt it. Some are.
Yeah.
Right.
So going back to something you said, I love that you talked about biology, where like we may not become a biologist, but to be an adult and not understand fundamental biology is actually very hard.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's hard on a societal level.
Yeah,
we learned that a couple years back.
Exactly.
Right. So to assuage that one, like, let's not head there.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what 10, 15 years ago, there was a big push for like literacy in every development, right? Like everyone is a reading teacher. Everyone is that. Do you see coding? Do you see computer science almost as like just another element of literacy moving forward, that it could be infused across the board?
You know, I love talking about the idea of infusing content across the board in terms of the curriculum, because there's the ideal side, which is all content should be integrated across the board.
Right. Let's stop siloing everything.
Right. Exactly, totally. Which we all know and everyone agrees with. But then there's the pragmatic side of me, which is that is crazy talk, because you're going to expect everyone to teach everything. Like that's not feasible. And so what I imagine, which is a mix of the two, I wouldn't call it a compromise. I'd say it's a best case scenario, which is imagine a framework that describes what AI literacy is. Here it is, right? I'm just going to sprinkle that in different places depending on its relevance. And some places are going to get very, very little. And it might only be for like the teacher and not the students, maybe like the PE teacher, right? But then in some cases, there's a lot of sprinkling, like a computer science class, which could hit the technical side as well as the human side of things, the social and ethical impact side of things. A social studies class, which would obviously focus more on the social and ethical impacts and history, but as well, maybe a little bit of the technology. So it's the sprinkling, and I would say that, there are some subjects will just be kind of I don't know, just they'll be totally fine where AI is really not involved from a curriculum standpoint.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up PE. We have I don't know that you know, Mark. We have the teacher in the area that came to one of our sessions on AI and was like, I don't know if there's anything here for me, but my wife drug him along.
Right.
And now he's like, oh, I'm using AI every week as a PE teacher because he's gathering data through Google Forms and then using Claude to crunch the data and return information to students and things like that. So for people that feel on the fringe, like the edge of that network, where could they start? Like if somebody's like, do you have a good resource?
Yeah, like people collecting those sprinkles. Where do we go?
So resources for teachers who want to start incorporating AI in their practice.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe starting like what offerings does code.org?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's odd. And I know this is being recorded, so I don't mind saying this, but what's odd is because of my role in Teach AI, I think of AI more as systemic level, and I look at everything, and I don't actually just talk about code.org stuff. So when you actually brought up that question, the first thing that came to mind actually was one of my colleagues, who Amanda was on that panel with me at Stanford.
Oh yeah, Bickerstaff.
Yeah, Amanda has this for-profit that actually acts like a nonprofit in that they put out so much content for free, and they're really engaged in the mission of safe and responsible AI in schools. And they have this prompt library. They have all these other resources, a whole slew of webinars that are all free and available. So I think about that. Obviously, I think about code.org stuff, which goes into much more depth because we have the budget to create these wonderful videos with Mira Murati and the CEO of Runway, image research Gen AI firm. And they're talking about how chatbots and LLMs work. Researchers like Deb Raji talking about equity and bias. So, if you go to code.org/AI, you have access not only to all of code.org's AI stuff, videos, curricula, stuff for teachers, but also our partners as well.
Oh, nice. Will people find
that's awesome.
Amanda's things there?
Yeah. Code.org/AI. So they won't find Amanda's stuff there. They'll find stuff from ISTE, from Khan Academy, ETS, and other partners. And Amanda's stuff, people can just type in, AI for education.io and probably find it.
Is hers the group that made the TeachFX app? Have you seen that one?
No, they don't create technology solutions.
Oh, okay.
Got it. It's just educational resources.
Yeah, educational resources, training, thought leadership, things like that.
Well, since you bring up Amanda, that reminds me, it was just like of the people that were at that summit, you and Amanda in particular just really seem to have a sense of what it is like in the trenches and also how difficult this is to get these resources into the hands of teachers, because there's resistance at like all levels. Like you have the teachers can't do one more thing. They're spread too thin. Administrators might have a fear response. Like there's, even like when we've talked about going out to trainings, like they have to unblock all of the resources that we're going to use in our, like this is intro to AI for teachers consulting stuff that we do. Like, and then what happens when we leave? Do they just block all of those things again? And then what I did is totally irrelevant. Like, what's that landscape like from your perspective?
I'm gonna talk from a perspective that maybe your audience doesn't get to hear about much, which is the state level, like state leadership level, which includes legislators, governor's office staff, as well as state education agency leaders. These are supervisor, director, and superintendent level people.
Dang. Okay.
And I will say that at the governor's level, most of the talk is mostly about just general AI, which makes sense. They're not going to be focused on education. So all of their task force developments, not recommendations or developments, they're them putting out executive orders, assigning the creation of a task force. It's never education specific. At best, it might have one line that talks about provide guidelines in education, right? And hopefully, sometimes, honestly, in my experience, there isn't enough education, and it's not even the right people sometimes in terms of those task forces. But that's a very typical thing when it comes to state task forces that cut across multiple sectors. That's why we advocate for specific AI and education task forces at the state level. At the state education agency level, there's a lot of interest. These people are responsible for guiding other people, who in turn often are guiding even other people as well. And they are just desperately looking for guidance that they can use to create their own guidance. And that's why we created that AI Guidance for Schools toolkit. So they're very hungry. They're very willing to talk about these things. They understand that these are potential transformative technologies. They understand the risks. They just want to figure it out and guide the other people. And then anything below that is actually quite similar, whether, state, district superintendent, they're all guiding someone. And then principals and on down, they just got other things going on, as you all know. So, they don't have like an AI problem. So they don't need to solve it or think about it. And that's life. That's reality. Yeah. And there will be some early adopters. There'll be some people who feel like they do need to do something or be proactive. But most of them are like, I got other things on my plate right now.
Dang.
Yeah. So that makes me think a lot of your work, if I'm correct, has been about equity and access, really making it for everybody. So something we've struggled with are the districts that just carte blanche have tried to block, which we know is actually not even a capability. You can't block these things. But I really worry about access and equity when it comes to these tools, because it is coming so fast at us, right? It just since, GPT-3 launched till now, the world is shifting. The world is changing. So what are your thoughts on like that, like equity, access, these districts that are just carte blanche blocking everything for, I know I work with a district that has blocked it completely for every staff, secretary, admin, teacher, student, the whole thing.
Yeah, this is our
And yet I know a student that runs it on their Chromebook.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So moving forward, I wonder, how are we gonna move past that? Is it gonna have to become a problem to be solved? I guess. Like what do you foresee there?
That's exactly like where I was headed too.
I mean, guaranteed. Yeah, of course it's going to be equity in education is an issue.
It's massive.
It's massive. Massive issue. It will be, a lot of people will say it will be exacerbated by AI, which is highly likely. And there's equity in terms of access, and which comes down to a lot of factors, including just, funding and being able to pay for like a school license to a something, right, for your teachers, let alone your students who are of age, which is a good point. We got to remember that there are age restrictions for some of the AI technologies, especially Gen AI. But there are other equity issues, and the way I approach it is, there are actually a lot of risks for marginalized populations, for English language learners. We've heard multiple times that first off, we shouldn't use these detectors, and that these detectors provide a lot of false positives for students who aren't using like the language basically these models are trained on, which makes sense, right? Model is trained on this particular language, and then some kid is inputting something different and that it's not used to, and it will not be able to process that as accurately as the stuff it was trained on. So being aware of those particular risks to already marginalized populations is how I think about equity. And the solution, by the way, is not just turn it all off. The solution is active education, like don't use, GPT detector, generative AI things, like that. It's not, let's just all shut it all down. That's not that gets into what you were talking about, which is folks who do just shut it all down. Well, then you got all these other kids out there who are using it and getting better prepared for the workforce. And these other kids are just like, I don't know, in paper pencil land. That's not fair either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I worry about, I like, that keeps me up at night, actually. Watching students with means and, a supercomputer in their pocket that has cellular access to everything in the entire world. And then the kids that don't. And it's just, I worry about that.
I think it's mostly the adults, frankly. Like I like the adult, what I mean is, if the adults build up a level of AI literacy, they're going to be able to make decisions that counteract a lot of the risks to these populations that we're talking about. Again, going back to that example, if you understand how AI works and you understand how these detectors work, like the fact is that they need access to the inner workings of models to actually do their work. So if a detector was trained on GPT, but not trained on Claude or trained on Gemini, it's going to do better with GPT than all these other things. Like just understanding that as a reason for not using detectors, because you don't know where the stuff is coming from or what tools kids are using. So that, like having that level of AI literacy, you don't maybe need to know that level, but you just do need to know that there is data, they're trained and how they work at a basic level. If you understand that, you have a framework for making multiple decisions that will help your students, all students.
That makes me think of a couple of things. I love in part of the toolkit from Teach AI, there's a whole section on how AI was used to generate the toolkit. I think that is
very few people get to that part. So I'm glad
English teacher.
I'm glad we get there.
You brought that up.
To the end.
Yeah, very few people find that section of the toolkit.
Oh, they just click to like, what do I need to know right now? Resources.
Exactly.
Actually, one of my students found it because we were looking at it when we're building policy, and they're like, "Oh, what if we did something like that?" Like, thanks for reading, kid. Awesome. I think that's such a cool model for transparency. But something that I found really cool in there is it mentioned putting the same prompt across multiple platforms and comparing them And I think that that's an awareness that people generally don't have, is that these models are not the same.
Yes.
No.
There's not one big well and everybody's dipping in the same place. Like they're competitors. They're all very different. So I love that you said that, like they've got to be using it. It reminds me of a man that we work with, Bill Daggett. He's saying, like, administrators, this is on you. You need to use it, and you need to be transparent to create a vacuum for your faculty to use it. And that'll trickle down to the students too.
Yeah. And even if the use of it ultimately ends up in, we're not ready for this, y'all. Like, there are too many issues, bias, misinformation, cultural insensitivities, potential over-reliance. But at least the adults did something about it and didn't just put their head in the sand. That is very justifiable, very justifiable. But just to not do anything at all, or honestly, at minimum, it's two things. An organizational learning experience for adults where they learn about it themselves. They do a little show and tell. They think about how they can use it to inform their own practice. And then guidance, like when to use, when not to use. And if it's mostly don't use it, and here are the very few exceptions for using it, that's fine too. But just some level of guidance. So that's not just a Wild West in a school or in a district.
Yeah. And I can only imagine these large districts. It's so hard to change anything. In these, like we're in a very small district. We're incredibly nimble.
Yep.
We're able to host a podcast. Our principal just picked in the door and was like, "Oh, hi guys!" Like,
yeah. It's definitely the most like the environment that we're in. We have a lot of privilege to innovate and to create, and that's even why we're in this space and why we're having this conversation.
Right.
We were right there at the beginning, seeing the potential of GPT, diving in and playing, and for me, actually, like one of the most exciting things to me about AI is that it can actually do the other thing as well. It can like make the resources more available and make things more accessible. So then you have like the underdog that can finally figured out how to get up to a higher level. I only really have anecdotal evidence for this, but in the class that I'm incorporating AI with the most is a college level English class, academic writing class that I'm teaching at a high school. So I'm teaching college level material. Some of this stuff I didn't read until grad school, and I'm like, let's see if we can pull this in and get you to the level where you can understand and work with these like really intense intellectual ideas. And I've seen it be like the ultimate scaffold. Yeah. We're also like mainstreamed as well. So like I have sped kids in my class that are taking this college level class and they're 16 years old. And it's like, okay, did you understand this part of Plato's Republic? And they're like, yes, it explained it to me. I understand what forms are. I can move forward with this idea. Like, to me, that's like the really exciting thing where you can like finally really personalize learning and leverage AI to do that and teach a student how to do that for themselves. Because I could sit there one-on-one and explain it to them and get to the same point, but I can't do that for every student. Like that no teacher could do that. So if I can use AI as an intermediary, then I can bring people up to a much higher level much faster.
You brought up a great point. I just want to emphasize this for folks who made it to the 30-minute mark here or whatever.
We have pretty dedicated listeners.
Nathan just said something very significant, which was teach kids how to use it on their own.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of pushback these days is because the AI, like the pedagogy or the method or like the outputs from the AI are coming out, and either the method or the outputs aren't cool, aren't good, aren't legit or whatever. But if you teach kids how to use this, like to be skeptical, to evaluate, but also like when to use it, when not to use it, to help their own skill development, like they should be intrinsically motivated to learn certain skills and not cheat because they're going to have to use them in the future or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so they should be taught how to do that best. Like any of us, if we were learning a skill, we wouldn't cheat ourselves. Like probably because we're not being graded or anything and we're doing it of our own volition, right? To but we're going to still use an AI to do something, but we're not going to literally have it pop out the answer for us. That defeats the whole purpose, right?
Right, exactly.
But I just want to emphasize that. That's a great point. Like, teach kids how to use these things.
Yeah. Like I talk to my class a lot in this whole, we use AI a lot. And I'm like, I hope one day I don't even have to talk about AI and cheating. And I hope that we just get to the point where it's a tool. And like my little teacher heart just swelled up this week because I overheard a conversation. I gave them a super meaty prompt that we were going to be discussing. And I heard one of my students, they listened to this, by the way, you know who you are. Yeah. And they were like, I do not understand this prompt. Like, what are we supposed to doing? Do you think if I just put it into ChatGPT and had it explain it, do you think Carr would be upset? And I just kind of overheard this conversation. The table's like, I'm pretty sure that's what he would tell you to do.
Yeah.
And so they did it. They solved all their problem right on their own. And then we're able to engage. They had a discussion, like a meta discussion about the prompt itself as scaffolded through AI. And then they got into the work itself.
Right.
It gave me hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you can teach students to build their own scaffolding using AI. And that's the exciting part for me. Like I love it so much. It's so cool. And what I've been able to do and see happen and things that are going on in your class as well, like the students actually don't like it once they have that empowerment, that involvement in their own learning, like just how you mentioned, like that intrinsic motivation. Once they can get access to the thing and start to play, like that starts to build that intrinsic motivation. And what I've seen and you, but also like anecdotal evidence again, but like if they're working to draft a piece of writing using AI, and this is, just this focused example, but if they're using that to draft a piece of writing, once their voice gets lost and it just sounds like the model, they don't like that.
Yeah.
They reject
they're
it.
like, no, I don't like, no,
Wow.
this has to be me. And so they're very like, once they're involved, they're like, no, it's really important for the human to do the human thing. Like, so that's why I don't really see AI as a threat to teaching at all either, because teaching is mentorship and connection, human connection.
It'd be cool. I've always thought, I haven't heard anyone say this before, but I've always thought of AI as taking the role of like the math answers at the end of the math book. Like you could always flip to them, right? But
totally.
But you're not going to flip to them because you want to actually practice and learn and see like whether you know how to do it. In some cases, like we could. Let's say these tools advance to the point where, like, literally, legitimately, they would even replicate your voice, right? And they could pop out a writing product in your voice, and it's like 95% the same as like if you were to do it on your own and spend time. But you know what? I could imagine a world where kids choose on their own to still do it all by themselves. Maybe just a little bit of starting AI help, just a little bit, just to get over that initial hump. But the rest is totally themselves because they appreciate the process and they just love it's like, I can get all the answers in the world, like, but I don't want to because it's not me. I want to do it. It's about the process and not the product. And so that'll be, I hope a teacher can tell me that one day without me like having to probe, like they just like volunteer that my kids just care about process, even though they could get the answers to everything that they're doing.
Well, and I think you bring up if you hear that, let me know because I want to be part of it. But one of the things that we harp on all the time, it's in, oh my gosh, every episode we talk about, is that one of those shifts away from content-driven education to skills, transferable skills. And I think that these, we talk about translational usage of technology, and AI right now is so, it like kills me when I hear teachers say like, "Whoa, will it build a worksheet for me?" Like, yeah, it will, but like there's a better way. And I feel in my experience that when students aren't focused on the content, but the skills development itself, they self-select. They're like, well, I don't know how to do that. I better figure it out. Instead of like, hey, ChatGPT, write my essay for you.
Right. But it's, I mean, I think it's because the educational system has valued product for such a long time.
Product and speed.
And that's, like quantity. Almost a manufacturing model, quantity over quality. And just like, oh, did you this is the one answer. I don't really care how you got it. This is the product. Like, and everything is evaluated on the thing that you create. We don't really have a good system for giving value to process. It's super hard.
AI, that's what I talked about at Stanford. I talked about how AI can be used to evaluate process, not just product. And it really,
totally.
So the thing that is disruptive will also be the thing that helps, is the engine. So the reason is AI for like that disruption. But the solution is also, AI is involved in the solution as well, in terms of evaluating process, evaluating persistence, resilience, collaboration, and other like kind of soft skills or non-cognitive skills that, previously were super hard or impossible to measure.
Whoa, that's kind of blowing my mind right now. Okay. So you're talking about like using AI tools to evaluate student process. This is how long it took you to do this. This is where you went wrong, but you got back on course.
That's what Chris Peaches from, his initial work with code.org was actually.
Yeah.
Like
really? That's so cool.
He took all our data, like the data, I don't know if it's called data exhaust, but it's just the data. Yeah, I think it is data exhaust from the experience of kids going through our tutorials and programming in our environment. And he basically, grabbed all that data to kind of figure out what kind of feedback he could give to kids along the way, AI enabled in this case, to help them, move best towards, the right answers or whatever you could call it. The great thing about a lot of these new tools is that these Gen AI tools, now that was something he was doing 8 years ago. These Gen AI tools will allow you to evaluate that, but for any open-ended task, not just like a predetermined, like moving them to a predetermined path. Exciting.
Yeah. Oh,
that's exciting.
That is awesome.
We need to get him on the show.
That is so cool. Yeah.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Exciting. There's so much. Yeah, bring it.
How often do people ask you all questions, by the way?
Often. Ask away. What do you got?
Like on your podcast?
Yeah, we usually, we'll get into the conversation mode and then a little bit of flip.
I'll ask you a question. Yeah. What do you think is not being talked about enough for AI in education right now?
Okay.
My brain goes to two places. I'll start that one. Mm-hmm. First, I think we're so stuck in the possible negatives and the difficulty that we're not looking at the possibilities, right? And people that think that they're looking possible are still looking at translational things. How can I automate a task instead of how can I make this now, transcendent? How can I get these kids to a really cool production level that is meaningful? And it's only natural because it's so the Wild West right now. But I really hope that the conversation can be like, yeah, we're done talking about the cheating stuff. Like, let's move into the possibility. Let's move into the levelizing and the equalization that can happen in education. We're very passionate about bringing that, which is what started this whole podcast. Actually, we wanted to bring voice to more than the worry,
right,
and more than the mire that we are in trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, I mean, all of the statistical analysis of cheating patterns. Yeah. I think there was a study from Stanford. There was another one that the advent of AI really hasn't shifted how much students cheat.
Yeah,
or not. It's the same.
Going to cheat, and people who aren't going to cheat aren't going to cheat.
They're not going to cheat.
That's exactly
and interesting data. It's only a set of about 500 students. I've been doing a survey of students and educators, 2 different surveys.
Oh yeah.
On what is cheating. It's just a list of scenarios. It comes from Matt Miller's AI in the Classroom book, which is fantastic. When you compare the answers, students tag things as unethical more than educators do. I found that to be very interesting. And I think that it's more of a, we're afraid to touch the hot plate moment. We don't know where the line is. We don't experience education in a gradient. Everything is black and white.
Right.
We're good or bad. Where maybe the adult brain is more like, hey, there's nuance to these discussions.
Makes sense.
It was really interesting. My students pulled that out of the data set, comparing the 2 sets of data.
Mm-hmm.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree with the whole transformative, aspect of AI and how kind of mired in like the practical or the potential negatives. For me to answer that question, I would say, what are we not talking about enough? I mean, this is just a silly thing, but I'm kind of tired of talking about the same old. That's kind of what, like, I would like to gather my peers together, folks like you all and other people who are trying to provide thought leadership and guidance to others, and say, hey, look, y'all, can we get beyond some of this? Like maybe even like for our circles or whatever, can we get beyond some basic stuff and get into some deeper things, which include like, how do we transform? Yeah. How do we transform education? How do we really use this moment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I'm really active on TikTok and different social media platforms. And it gets so tiring that even the amazing content creators that are educators trying to advance this discussion, it's still so much about how to avoid pitfalls instead of like, okay, can we let other people talk about that? And
yes,
creatives that are willing to take that dive, saying like, no, I get it. There are really scary things out there. Yeah. We haven't even talked about synthetic biology, right? There's really scary possibilities out there, but I can't let it drive my
It's safer
whole
to talk
tractor.
about risks and be an influencer who talks about risks than an influencer who talks about the positives and is driving towards the positives. It's just safer.
It's safer, and yet, hopefully people can get to a place talking like admins need to use AI to make a vacuum so that teachers have a space to move into. Maybe that's what needs to happen. We need to be sharing more of the truly incredible things. Like, I mean, you blow things out of the water in your class. Just sharing that and making it more normalized to talk about highly advanced usages of these things that are also going well. And talking about how it stumbled along the way. Like this whole process, this whole 6-week process of learning. I've been teaching my students literally how to cheat with AI, because that was a huge buy-in.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to teach you how to use this. You gotta know. We can't talk about what is ethical and what is unethical if we don't explore the whole thing. I was like, so safe space, tell me how you're using it. I won't go rat you out to your teacher. I will show you a better way to do it. Yeah. And that has led to them writing the policy for the school. We're going to present it to the school board. And I'm blown away after, 16, 18 years in the classroom. The quality of the writing is really high, and they're not using AI to write it. They're using AI for all the ideation and going back and forth, almost like a dialectical machine, right? Back to Greek philosophy.
Yeah, I've always talked about that.
But I'm really glad that you brought that up, Pat, because we need to be in that. One of the original decisions that we made to put ourselves out there, to use the ability that we have in our school. We have a very privileged place.
Yep.
We're middle-aged white men in education in a school that honors professionalism and really is excited for the things that we do.
Yeah. Very privileged position.
Very privileged. Sure. We know that.
Yeah.
But how do we? So here's a great question to get back. How do like-minded individuals take that next step to get noticed? So you talked a lot about governmental, legislative, special things. One of the other fears, I said I had two fear paths. The other fear is educators don't get a place at those tables. And I sent in some feedback to the Stanford Summit, which was truly incredible. But all day it was teacher, teacher, teacher. And I think there were 3 of us there.
Yeah, actually practicing.
And so I was like, hey, next year I would love to see a 4th grade teacher on a panel.
Totally. Yeah.
How do we?
Wow.
I think that there's a want, there's a desire from the top if we want to use a top-down hierarchy.
Yeah.
But how do people get found, and how do we encourage the people in those decision places to do that? Welcome to the question.
No. I mean, is this. Like, I like being open, especially on podcasts where, again, if people make it to this point, they deserve to hear a little bit of. So this is your reward, folks. This is some I wouldn't say hot off the presses. This is even before any presses. I am currently thinking about a way to engage educators like themselves. So Teach AI mostly focuses at the policy thought leadership level. So, district leaders, folks like that, right?
Yep.
And on up. And we leave it to our partners to train teachers and provide curriculum and all that. But, I, as a teacher, desperately want the input of teachers and want to just be around teachers. Like even being around you all is super grounding and inspiring for me. And so I'm thinking of a way to create some type of like big fellowship community thing that is structured enough, but also free enough for people to really like learn from one another and get noticed and elevate these examples, right? Now, even when I say that, I think, oh, Pat, this is just another professional learning community. There must be a bunch of them, forums and stuff like that. I'm thinking, what value would this have? The only value it would have compared to other existing forums is that you would have, these people would have direct access to the machinery of Teach AI to elevate their stories and, elevate their example and all that, both cautionary as well as celebratory. So I don't know, might happen.
Might happen. You kind of sparked an idea. It makes me think of the Google Innovators program, right? Where it's
totally.
like something like that.
Yeah. Like I said, there's lots of these kinds of things, but the difference is that, that Google Innovators thing or Apple certified educator or whatever, a lot of that serves the company and, it's like a marketing thing or
it checks a box for the district
or it just builds the capacity of the teachers, which is great too. This would literally be like one key thing would be to elevate stories and amplify them. So we'll see.
Totally.
Yeah.
We're
game.
Awesome.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
I guess a huge mission of ours it is. Hence the name of the podcast.
It is.
Right? What teachers have to say.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I always, I'm actually going to start writing a book on this. Yeah. I have being a musician and that was like my life mostly up to, I got into teaching way later. Like I've lived a life and then was like, I started teaching music a lot and then realized that this was a pretty cool pathway I could take. But what I always go back to, I call it band logic. And, coming from like the punk, like metal DIY community, those are my people, like there's a really strong community around that like underground music thing. And I almost feel like it's the same for teachers that are on this edge, that are really trying to push into unknown places for the benefit of their students. Like, and we need a community around that, so that we can have shared resources. Like the whole point of DIY music is, okay, I want to go on tour. Well, I know people all across the country then that are also in bands. And so I can actually go and do that. And then they'll promote my show and I'll promote their show when they come to my town. Like that's how it works. So I almost feel like that is the way to go, like from the bottom up type of thing where teachers can set that culture in a positive way. This isn't a fully formed thought. I'm just spitballing here, but like I just love the idea of a DIY teacher community of sharing resources. I mean, the Edge of Protocols community that we're a part of is similar. It's a huge
15,000 strong, happiest place on the internet.
Yeah, and like sharing resources, I'm on there all the time. Edge of Protocols is cool because Edge of Protocols is another thing that really values process and for the benefit of students and training students up and teaching skills. And so as we move forward into this new space, that's something.
I have an idea. Because the reason why I balk at any kind of creating a new professional learning community is because of the new professional learning community and ones exist, like the ones that you just mentioned, and even the work that you all do. I'm just thinking, I think I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just work with existing groups, like your podcast or that Edu Protocols group that you talked about, and just have them select the stories and all that and bubble them up and so that I can use them and kind of have some grounding to a lot of this promise, benefit, risk stuff floating around there. Like real stories from real educators
They're there
in
too.
those resources. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like for our listeners, Edu Protocols Community on Facebook. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll approve your application.
It's the only reason to be on Facebook. Like, I'm just like, why is this still on Facebook? It should have its own website.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. And it's fun. There's so many AI vanguards on there.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
I love it. That was a student was like, so are you like an expert now in AI? I'm like, no, I just started using it a long time ago. And he was like, so I'll call you a vanguard. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm an AI vanguard. I'll take it. But it's really cool. Like, you should check that group out, Pat. That it's just a constant stream of positivity and file sharing and process sharing.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, that's where people will be like, oh my gosh, guys, I have to teach chemistry next year. I've never done this before. What do you have? And it's just like
resources.
And also there's the best thing that I see is vulnerability. And they're like, guys, I tried this today. It was a hot mess. What? This is what went wrong. And people are like, oh, I did that too here, so I fixed it. There's not this awful trolling that's going on there. But AI specific, I think what it means to be an Edu Protocols teacher is to try different things and to explore. And so AI is a really big, you see the beautiful things coming up in there. Like really cool usages of like AI created imagery, integrating source book. It's really cool.
Yeah. Cause I mean, that's, you're like, oh, I need to tap into professional learning communities that already exist and totally, I mean, I think that is the way. I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. There's good ones out there.
But yeah, there's like so many that are so negative though, because it's real. Like teachers are hurting and they need a place to vent that hurting, but at the same time that's like not helping the profession either, and there's so much negativity around students right now too. Just like, oh, they just want to cheat, they don't want to do the way. It's this almost the same narrative as like no one wants to work anymore. It's like, what?
Right. The whole like kids are lazy. Like, no, they just aren't going to put up with your junk anymore. Like,
we're not
here for that anymore. They know the possibilities out there and you're not giving it to them.
Yeah. I'm not going to do the worksheet.
Gen Alphas.
Oh yeah.
Vanguards in their own.
Have nothing. I will not be doing that is kind of the response. And then what teachers are confronted with that. I was just doing a training in New York and this teacher, we were kind of just round table. I was sitting at one of the tables and he just was so honest and he was just like, well, the way that I teach or the way that I know how to teach is no longer effective. He was just like, the first step is admitting a problem, right? Like the first step to fixing the problem. And he was just hitting this wall of, I don't know how to move forward. And so that's why I'm here. And I feel like that's actually a good thing. Like teachers that are hitting those walls, like you need to now is the time. Like now is the time to pivot away from what you've been drilling for 10, 20 years.
Try something new.
Totally. I actually have to go.
Okay.
That's
okay. Well, Pat, I look forward to working with you in the future. We're just going to leave it at that because I've really enjoyed the conversation today.
Yeah, and sorry for the abrupt ending, folks.
No worries.
That's okay.
TTI wants to hear from you. Please, email in when you want and sign up for releases. We're going to release a policy resource in mid-April at ASU+GSV.
Awesome. Yep.
Where I'll see hopefully a lot of you all at the AIR Show.
Yep. We'll see you there.
All right.
We'll be there.
All right. Thanks, man.